Welcome everyone. Welcome everybody. Nyama, Wurundjeri Kulin, Mirambikal Bikwenawap Daraban, Bagangbal Awitjuri, Bagangukal Nangit Bambuth Ba Yelingu. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people on whose land Darebin Council stands and pay my respects to elders past and present. I and my fellow councillors are delighted to welcome students here to this meeting and all members of community and staff of Darebin Council. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I'd also like to welcome members of Council's Young Citizens Jury. We'll be hearing more about the inspiring work of the jury as part of today's agenda. But I would particularly like to take this opportunity to thank and welcome Supporting Schools this afternoon. Council meetings are where we make decisions about council services and projects that impact on people's lives. Today, we will be considering a range of matters, including initiatives that relate to addressing youth homelessness, the acknowledgement of our First Nations peoples, reducing waste and energy use, supporting local businesses and providing services for older people who live in our community. After attending today's meeting, you may feel inspired to get more involved in your local community or in the work of groups such as the Young Citizens Jury or in your own school. We're excited that so many young change makers and future community leaders are in the room, and we hope that you enjoy the meeting today. My name is Susan Rennie and I'm the Mayor of the City of Darebin. Moving to the agenda, membership. This is where we note which councillors are present for the meeting today. It's a bit like a roll call. And I'll note that membership is as listed in the agenda with approved leave of absence from Councillor Steph Amir and Tim Lawrence. Disclosures of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts to disclose? Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mary, I don't have a conflict to disclose, but I'd like to point out that on this occasion, as I work in the industry of the aged care, I do not have to disclose a conflict because item number, I can remember, 8.8 does not have a conflict with my current workplace.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. It is really important that councillors only vote on matters where they're completely independent. For example, a councillor would need to advise us if they live next door to a property we're discussing today, because they might not be able to vote about what is good for the whole of Darebin. And that's why we declare a conflict of interest at the beginning of council meetings. Confirmation of the minutes. We also keep detailed record of every decision that council makes, and these are kept in a document called the minutes. Councillors.
Happy to move the recommendation. Happy to second.
The recommendation is that the minutes be accepted from the last meeting. That's moved by Councillor Lassurf and seconded by Councillor Williams. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings us to question and submission time. First, before our meeting, we are always keen to hear what our community thinks. And so at the start of every meeting, we have 30 minutes set aside to allow people to come and ask a question. I understand that some young people here today may have questions. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask those questions. But firstly, we take questions that are received before the meeting. And I'll ask people to come up and we'll give you the microphone. And for those people who have submitted a question, I'll start with you and then welcome other questions from the audience. So, the first question that we've received today is Valerie Moore of Fairfield. Ms. Moore, are you here? Please come up. Up to the lectern. I'm just going to make sure that that's working so that we can be sure that the audience, the gallery members can hear you. We'll get the council officer to work out. Is that? No. We need to get the microphone working, firstly for the minutes, but also because our meetings are live streamed, and so we need to make sure the sound is working for the live streaming.
Ingrid, that was working. That worked. When you did that. It's just not very loud.
No, they're both playing up.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Good stuff. Can the audience hear that? Thank you.
I raised the question of food, organic food, the FOGO system, food organics, garden organics, because I'd seen it working in New South Wales and I didn't realise that in fact you have it here. So, or you've asked people if they want it, and some people use it, but it costs money at the moment to use it. Is that right? Yes? So, I'm just wondering, I've picked up your agenda and I'm reading it there as you've called me up to talk about it, so probably all the answers are in that booklet over there. You're going to proceed with this idea of people putting biodegradable stuff in a particular bin which is picked up and it's channeled into a factory where they turn it into compost and sell it back to us, which is a wonderful idea, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, that's all.
Ms. Moore, thank you for that question. And it is very timely because there is something on the agenda tonight. So we are considering a report at today's meeting that proposes rolling out a food waste recycling service citywide as part of our green waste recycling service. An officer will get in touch with you after the meeting today to let you know exactly what council decides. The next question is from Naomi of Preston. Naomi, are you here? I will read Naomi's question. In light of a devastating result for climate action at yesterday's federal election, will the Darebin Council consider joining other countries in declaring a climate emergency, as it is only through local government action and the determination of the community that the changes we must make immediately to prevent this existential crisis can be delivered? Thank you, Naomi, for your question. Darebin Council was the first government in the world to declare a climate emergency. It was one of the first initiatives of the current council. We made this decision on Monday, the 21st of August, 2017. I think that's incorrect. We made our decision to declare a climate emergency on the 5th of December 2016. We have been really heartened at how many governments around the world have now also declared a climate emergency, including the cities of Yarra, Ballarat and Moreland in Australia, and global cities of Los Angeles, San Francisco and Greater London. Just weeks ago, the Conservative-led government in the UK also declared a climate emergency where there is strong bipartisan support for climate action. The science is unequivocal. We have a short period of time to cut emissions and we will be facing significant global security, agricultural and economic challenges. To solve this problem means switching all our power to renewable energy. It means moving away from petrol-driven vehicles and gas in our homes, and it means cutting the amount of waste we generate and cleaning up how we dispose of it. We call on the Australian Government to make this unavoidable transition to low carbon quickly and to harness the power of business and industry to achieve it, by setting the rules so that clean business of the future can thrive and so that existing businesses change their business models quickly, which will also establish them as leaders of the global economy. The Paris targets are not fast enough to solve the problem. Aiming for these targets is like aiming to hold back a bushfire with 3 tankers when the experts say you need 9. We must work faster than the targets suggest. To that end, we are working on a number of fronts to cut emissions. Today, Council is considering a proposal to further roll out of the Solar Savers program, which is helping around 1,000 households put solar panels on their roofs, as well as a proposal to roll out new food waste recycling service. Both of these proposals would cut emissions significantly. We are also currently consulting on a proposed parking strategy which would help make it easier for people to walk, cycle and catch public transport. We have also established Climate Emergency Darebin, which is a group of experts in our community to help us with the big task of embedding an emergency response in our own activities, to help our community do the same and to contribute to a rapid response Australia-wide. I'll ask an officer to get in touch with you tomorrow to let you know what the outcome of our decisions are today. Naomi has asked another question. I'll also read that out. I would like to know what plans the Council has for tree planting across Darebin. In the face of increasing temperatures, what is the Council doing to create a green canopy to future-proof against hotter, longer periods of weather, and how can the community contribute to this? Thank you, Naomi, for that question. Council has a significant tree planting program and we will plant almost 2,000 trees across the City of Darebin this year, in addition to several thousand trees and shrubs in bushland areas. The 2019-20 budget includes $700,000 to continue this work. Council's urban forest strategy sets the aim of increasing the canopy coverage on public land from 13.8% to 25% in 2025. Council is well on track to achieve this target as the municipality canopy coverage has increased to over 16% since 2013. In addition, Council recently introduced a local law to protect significant trees on private property. The next question is by Mr John Berryman. John, would you like to come up to the lectern? John, thank you for your question. I note that it is quite long. I would suggest that you don't need to read out council motions, as we did pass those motions. So I'll ask you to present to us the parts of the question, but not read out the full text of council motions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also would like to welcome all of the students and the people of the future who are here today and be focused on the issues of environment and climate. I think this is just a wonderful opportunity. My question is with regard to a motion that was put 342 days ago by this council, and it asked for 5 actions by the council officers. But the critical questions for the council officers were to request that the valuation report prepared by the Valuer General on the Strathallan open space was made available to all affected third parties. The second part that I want to draw attention to this afternoon is a request that the Valuer General, that the officers seek the Valuer General to provide a second evaluation and involve the land monitor. Now, there were 3 other parts to that. I won't read them out. And there were, in fact, then on September 24, 2 further actions requested by the council, and that was 238 days ago. My question is, would you please advise the status of each of these actions that the council has requested?
Thank you very much, Mr Berryman. There is no... councillors are well aware of the history of this matter. In terms of responding to each action specified, I'll take these on notice. I do note that in the interim, the Minister for Planning has confirmed that the land is to remain public open space, which follows Council's advocacy. I am advised that the officers will provide a report to Council on this matter in coming months, which will be comprehensive. Thank you. The next question is from Mr Peter Roberts. Peter, would you like to come up?
My name is Peter Roberts. My postcode is 3095, but I'm here as the representative of the Strathallan Golf Club, which is in Darebin.
Can't hear.
Sorry?
If you could speak loudly, I think some people are having
Okay.
trouble.
I have 2 questions. Just explain that the Strathallan Golf Club has received a rate notice reflecting a 500% increase in the rate charges from the prior year, basically moving up from $4,000 to $24,000. The club lodged an objection, and on May the 8th, the decision on the objection was issued, and just is a partial allowance of the objection, and as the rates are based on the value of the land, the value has been decreased from $13.5 million to $12.2. A resulting appeal will be lodged by the golf club at VCAT on or before the 10th of June 2019. The question is Council satisfied that the revised valuation figure as determined by the DCC valuer of 12.2 is a reasonable and defendable valuation attributed to the golf course land?
Thank you for your question, Mr Roberts. Yes, the valuation for 100 Main Drive, Bundoora of $12.2 million is considered to be reasonable and defendable. As you are aware, Council's contract valuer initially valued this property at $13.5 million as at the 1st of January 2018. valuation has been amended down to 12.2 million on the 6th of May 2019 in response to the notice of objection. As per the valuation objection process from the 2018 Valuation Best Practice Guidelines, an objector who is dissatisfied with the decision of the valuer can refer the matter to VCAT for a review of the decision. If there is no referral, then the objection is concluded. In relation to your second question, councillors will consider the matters raised within the letter. As councillors have not yet received a copy of this letter, no specific response can be provided. Council's position remains that the land occupied by the Strathallan Golf Club will continue to be public open space and retain its public park and recreation zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of questions that were received prior to the meeting. I'll now invite members of the gallery to pose any questions, and particularly welcome questions from any students of William Ruthven Secondary College. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Yes, please come up and state your name and postcode.
Yeah.
Come up.
I'm Han. I live in Darabin district behind here, just about more than 30 years. And recently we see tree because developer around here built so much of properties and the tree been cut down a lot. I saw the birds and things we can hear the noise and they're not happy with that. And at the moment I heard proposed plan of the building, 5-story building between the police station and library. It will be, I think, affect the trees, parking space, and also if the build like that, the population there will increase. And then the children, they run around in the library will be safe or not? That's my question. And a lot of people discuss, and then they quite not happy about that idea. So, can you please answer that question? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. In respect to the issue of trees, Council recently passed a tree protection local law that means that trees on private property are afforded more protection than in the past. If any resident now wants to cut down or significantly prune a tree with a circumference of more than 100 centimetres, they must apply to Council for a permit, and there are penalties if people chop down trees without that. That's a new tree protection law that we didn't have in Darebin in the past, and we do hope it will make a difference to our canopy cover. In respect to the block of land between the police station and the library, Council is investigating a social housing project on that land. That would be built using the air rights above the car park and is not anticipated to significantly impact on car parking on that site. Thank you for that question.
So that one,
Come up. You may ask a second question, but we'll ask that you come up to the lectern for the second question.
is it that one the building will be go ahead and build? Is that be built? Is that definite?
It is a community housing project that is being proposed,
Yeah.
and we are seeking expressions of interest from housing providers to see what they would be interested in building. No final decision has yet been made on what will occur on the site.
May I have another question? The last one. Because my friend neighbor, she can't talk, so I have to come and ask that question. And now can I talk about the tree?
I'll take that question then as the second part of your first question and
Yeah,
allow you one
okay.
final question.
Yeah, okay. At the moment, we see a lot of trees. The council change the tree, grow tree around, so we're happy with that. But the tree, as the tree grow older, the basement getting the walkway getting uneven, and as you know, in Preston, quite a lot of elderly live in Darebin, and also in my street, a lot of handicapped people there. And my husband, 2 years ago, because the footpath is not labeled, my husband, he got an accident and broke both of his hand, and he in the council for a couple of months. So he said the council send a staff come out and check the street, or wait until we report about the even street. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Han. Council has a regular program of inspecting all footpaths, but it is also helpful if residents do alert us if they believe there is a problem with any footpath. We're also, in terms of tree selection, careful to avoid trees that might impact on footpaths, because some species of trees have more significant impacts on footpaths than others. I'm very happy to provide further information, so we'll get your contact details and make sure we also follow up with further information on those matters. Mr. Berryman?
Am I allowed a second question now?
You had one question, so yes, you are allowed a second question.
I'm aware of the governance guidelines of the council, which talk about transparency, they talk about efficiency, and they talk about effectiveness. Is the council satisfied that after 348 days there appears to be no action on the motion that was passed last June? And the one action that you mentioned was in fact not the result of anything done by the council, but was the result of the planning minister writing to the university. I'm very frustrated that normal guidelines of governance appear to be ignored on this issue.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Berryman. As I stated, a report is coming to council, so there has been a significant amount of work being undertaken. When that report comes to council, I'm certain there will be further information we can provide to you. But in the meantime, council did advocate also very strongly, along with the Strathallan Golf Club and the Save Strathallan Open Space Group, to get that commitment from the Minister that the land would remain public open space.
Can we get a better guideline some months to come? I mean, it's been 12 months, nothing.
Look, you know, I do know that it has taken too long, and that is a very frustrating and difficult situation for the club. We are very pleased that the Minister made that commitment that it would remain public open space in perpetuity, and I'll make sure that we get in touch with you to actually progress this more quickly, noting that I did meet with you and Peter last month. So thank you.
We're grateful for the meeting we had with you. We still have one fundamental issue, and that is the
Mr.
valuation.
Berryman.
That is the core of this motion last year.
Thank you.
It's the core of our issue now.
Mr. Berryman, I'm going to ask if you could take your seat. Thank you. I'd like to invite further questions from the gallery, and particularly say to students, don't be shy. There's no bad question. Yep, please come on up. So if you could just start by saying your name and postcode.
My name's Jeremy Johnson, and I live in Reservoir. What plan does the council have in supporting schools to be environmentally sustainable?
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for that question. Darebin Council works quite closely with a number of schools in our area, and some of that work involves waste education and recycling education. Last year we had an initiative with schools where we invited school students to actually think about and design a logo that could be used in our recycling education initiatives. There are a number of ways in which council officers are also reaching out to schools, and we will follow up with further information about those to you. Thank you again, Jeremy. Yes, please come up.
Thanks for your time, Mayor. From Reservoir, I just have a simple question of what is the plan of the City of Darebin to reduce Islamophobia?
Thank you very much for that question in relation to reducing Islamophobia. Council works very hard to ensure that Darebin is a safe space for people from all communities. We recently passed a motion endorsing a memorandum of understanding with the local mosque. We have a long-standing relationship with the mosque to ensure that we have good relationships and that they can come to us with any issues. We know that Islamophobia is a significant issue in the community, and tonight many councillors here are going to the annual Ramadan Iftar dinner at East Preston Islamic College to actually reach out and extend our support. In addition, we have an interfaith committee, which is an advisory committee to council made up of people of various faiths, and they consider all of the things that happen in our municipality and how they ensure that community members are safe and welcome. I've been a member of that advisory committee, and there's always one or two councillors who attend and who inform council's decision making. Following the terrorist attack in New Zealand, council met with local leaders of the mosque to actually offer our support and make sure that any things they needed in order to make the community safer were put in place. We continue to work with schools. We have quite a close relationship, in particular with the East Preston Islamic College, and we would love to hear your ideas. So if there are things you think we should be doing that you're not sure we are doing, please let us know, because we really listen to the community in respect to things that would make you feel, and all members of our community, feel more welcome and safer in Darebin. So thank you very much. Question. Are there further questions from the gallery? Yes, please come up.
Good afternoon, my name's Emily Hughes. I'm from Northcote, 3070. I'm a member of the Darebin Youth Jury, and recently we made a submission regarding the 2019-2020 budget. In the submission we talked on many areas, however I would like to further question how the Darebin Council is taking steps to reduce youth unemployment and underemployment alongside the hiring of young people as 1.5% of their permanent workforce.
Emma, thank you very much for your question. Darebin Council is really committed to ensuring that young people in Darebin have access to quality employment. We have a number of traineeship and apprenticeship positions. In addition to that, I'm going to ask the CEO to talk more specifically about some of the things that Darebin Council is doing. And Sue, if you could touch on procurement processes particularly, that would be of interest, I think.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. So Council does quite a lot in terms of partnering with employment businesses to help support youth employment, particularly local youth employment. But the truth is there's more that we should be doing and could be doing. We have a number of traineeships and a number of apprentices, and I know for sure that the Council would like to make sure that we had more. And so one of the things that I have my staff working on at the moment is to try to look at ways in which we might support young people working in council as a career. I find working in council a very rewarding career, and I'd like to share that with young people too. And another thing that we're trying to do is to make sure that council has a $200 million budget, and one of the things that we know is that if we can direct our spending, so the things that we buy and the equipment we hire and the companies that we use, if we can direct that to a more local environment, then actually what we will do is create jobs. And there's the ability, so that's another piece of work that we're looking at right now, to try to find whether there's ways to require people that do work for us to also take the same approach and have lots of young people who are local working for us.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. We will be hearing about the youth services strategy as we move into the agenda, and I think there'll be further opportunity then to hear from councillors who are very passionate about this area. Yes, Councillor Newton.
I'd like to move a motion to extend question time for 15 minutes.
Thank you. So moved. Seconded by Councillor Messina. All those in favour? That motion is carried. So we allow 30 minutes for public question and submission time. That 30 minutes is almost up. We're not able to go over that without a motion of council. So we have just had a motion which extends public question time by another 15 minutes. So please don't be shy. We've now got the time, and if you have a question, we'd love to hear from any member of the gallery. Are there any further questions? Yes, please come up.
This is more a complaint than a question, but it's after the fact. It's cutting down beautiful trees in parks for reasons that but we can't understand why. About a year ago, a truck arrived on a Saturday morning and proceeded to damage trees in the park next to me. And I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, these trees give you an itch." Lagunarias. Somebody here assumes that they cause allergic reactions or itches or something. They're beautiful trees. They used to be full of lovely birds. But they came down on that Saturday morning, and I was told that this council wanted to get rid of lagunarias all over the Darebin area. And I'm not sure if they've done that or not. I know where one or two are, and I'm not going to tell you. So, I'm just voicing this disappointment because trees, this is 20-year-old trees. It's really sad to see them go down. I believe there was a complaint somewhere in North Sydney about a tree like this on a footpath, and the council there said, well, if you get an itch, stay away from the tree, and I think that's very wise. So I'm just saying, why did you cut them down? And I don't understand it.
Can I just ask, before you sit down, for confirmation about the park in question? Susan Ryan Park. Thank you for that question. I would say that it is not council practice to cut down trees because they cause an itch or an allergy. Council's practice is only to remove trees that are unwell and cause a potential safety hazard. But we will follow up with you in respect to that particular instance so that you can get better information about why those trees were removed.
Yes, we are also, but they're not there anymore.
No, and that's why we are very careful not to remove trees because they provide habitat in the community. Are there further questions from the gallery? Yes, please come up. Mr. Nugent, just your name and suburb, please.
John Nugent, Epping, 3076. Mayor Reddy, my question is, a prominent Australian passed away last Thursday. I noticed that on the council building there was no flags at half-mast. Why not?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Nugent. I'm going to defer that question to the CEO because there is a policy about that.
Through you, Mayor Reddy, thank you for the question, Mr. Nugent. Yes, on the passing of former Prime Minister Bob Hawke, the flags were lowered to half-mast once we had direction from the state government to do so. So there's actually a flag act that directs all of this, if you can believe it. And so once we received that notification, they were lowered to half-mast.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the gallery? Yes, please come up.
My name is Mariam Nessa and I'm from Doncaster. That's 3109. I wanted to ask, how can the council assist young adults to find affordable and safe housing?
Thank you for that question, which is also very timely tonight because we are considering a matter directly relating to youth homelessness. So council does a lot of advocacy in this space. We're aware that it can be very difficult and that housing in Darebin particularly has become less and less affordable, particularly for people on lower incomes. I'd encourage you to listen to the debate on the matter at 8.2, which is in relation to a lease for Kids Undercover, which provides an excellent example of some of the work that council does in this space. We'll provide you also with some further details following the meeting about other activities that council's doing. Are there further questions? There being none, I'll move into the rest of the meeting. So, item 6 on the agenda is petitions. Now we see whether anyone has lodged a petition. To my knowledge, there are no petitions that have been received. So we'll move straight to item 7, urgent business. There is no urgent business tonight, or to this afternoon. So we move to 8, consideration of reports, and the first one is 8.1, Youth Services Strategy.
I'll move that, Mayor.
Moved by Councillor McCarthy and seconded by Councillor Newton. Councillor McCarthy, and I'll just before you start let audience members know, the mover of a motion has 3 minutes to speak. The seconder and any subsequent speakers to the motion have 2 minutes to speak. And the mover, if there has been any opposition to the motion, then has a 2-minute opportunity to sum up the debate. So, Councillor McCarthy, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And for those who haven't seen it, the motion that we're debating is actually up on the screen in case you don't have the paperwork.
Hopefully this is on. I'd like to, first of all, acknowledge all the students and staff members of schools that have joined us here this afternoon, and particularly the citizen jury members who I know have put an enormous amount of work into where we are today, which is, of course, adopting the youth services strategy for the City of Darebin. Councillors would have seen from the agenda we have a number of reports here that we're actually considering. One of those is the final report for the 18-19 year in relation to the Youth Services Implementation Plan, and of course the adoption of the 19 to 21, so 2019 to 2021 Youth Services Strategy and Background Report. These documents, adopted by Council this afternoon, will drive and direct council action in partnership with young people to support the improvement of wellbeing outcomes, environmental and citizenship engagement, employment opportunities, and a whole raft of other positive outcomes for young people in our city. We haven't arrived at this stage lightly. There's been over 1,000 young people that have been involved in the development of the documents that you have before you. And this is the most in-depth development of a youth services strategy, as I understand it, in Darebin's history. So I want to acknowledge again the work of not only the 1,000 young people, but also those young people from the Youth Citizens Jury who've played a critical role in both driving the process and also facilitating the involvement of other young people. When we speak about young people in the City of Darebin, we're speaking about a very broad age range, from 12 to 25. And we know that the challenges and opportunities at each age are different. However, what we have before us is a strategy which touches on 5 key goals identified through that consultation process. I'm just going to share these with you, councillors, because I think it's important to understand the gravity of the challenges, but also the opportunity for us to partner with young people. Those focus areas range from having a healthy, connected and resilient community of young people being employed, educated and financially secure, young people being safe and welcomed, young people being empowered, confident and engaged, and lastly, young people being hopeful about the future. Councillors, on page 11 of the report, the council report supporting this youth services strategy, you'd see the key focus areas under each of those. And I want to just draw a connection between the questions that we heard this afternoon and those key focus areas, which are directly aligned. Concern about the environment, concern about climate and climate emergency, concern about employment, housing and involvement of young people in our community. I hope, and I'm confident that this is the case, that
10 seconds.
the directions in this strategy touch on those themes in the best way possible, developed with young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I really want to commend the youth jury and the 1,000+ young people that got involved with this strategy, as well as Joe and Clinton and the whole youth services team for putting together such an incredible document. I really think that this lifts the way that we think about young people and the way that we address their issues. And I think the way that this strategy has been informed by them has been really important and meaningful. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things from the report. So that this strategy has used co-design principles to develop the strategy. And I know we've got young citizen jury members here today, so thank you so much for coming. We know that this approach has ensured that young people have been at the centre of this project. We also know that youth services has not always engaged with families, and that this strategy really brings that to light and makes sure that we look at families, not just the youth, when we're going through this strategy. I also just wanted to point out that there is a national vision for young people, which is to grow up safe, healthy, happy and resilient, and to have the opportunities and skills they need to learn, work, engage in community life and influence decisions that affect them. I think today is a really good example of that. We're having our council meeting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon for the first time, and to have so many students from the local schools here today. I also note that our youth population is growing. So we've got, including the cold youth population. And I just wanted to make mention that of one particular thing that really struck me from the comments, which was a person who's 24 in Reservoir saying, myself and many other young people are struggling to survive. We can't afford food and are always trying not to get our Centrelink cut off for no reason. So I just wanted to note that that really affected me, and that I really hope that this youth strategy can make a difference to young people's lives. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd like to make a few comments in relation to this report, and I really welcome the report, and I really welcome the process that we've gone through by setting up a youth jury in order to come up with some of the recommendations that are before us in this report. I just want to touch on some important statistics which actually inform the recommendations that come out of this report. About 15% of our community is of young people, and 32% of those are young people who were born overseas. So that's quite a significant figure. And they're mainly from China, India, and Vietnam. And the other interesting statistic, which I thought was quite, which really made a point, was nearly 20% of young people come from low-income households. And I think that actually helps to inform the types of strategies that the youth jury have come up. And in terms of the focus areas that these reports talk about, and it's been touched on by other councillors, is one of the key ones is finding a job. A lot of young people talking about the difficulty of finding work and holding on to jobs. The other issue that actually emanates from this report is the issue about mental health, and which is associated with a whole number of factors, drug and alcohol abuse and things like that. And also the other issue that comes out of these reports is the issue about racism and discrimination in our community. And I think that the jury's actually highlighted some of these points. And I'll just finish on this point, which I think is a key point in this report, is that young people are seen as change makers, as protagonists. They're not seen as people where we deliver a service to, but people that actually come up with the solutions and actually as future decision makers in relation to the problems that confront them in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there further speakers? There being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. We will note that that was a unanimous decision. That brings us to item 8.2, proposed lease to kids undercover. Moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
Oh, it's clunky. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. Kids Undercover is a 3-year pilot program called Village 21. The pilot project seeks to prevent homelessness by extending care for people at the ages of 18 to 21 years old. A similar model is actually in the UK, and it's been reported that it actually has a very successful rate of having 50% of those that are out of home care is quite successful, that they keep them off the street and they're actually successful in either getting a job or continue doing training or some sort of schooling. Kids Undercover is for the purpose of providing temporary, relocatable housing accommodation for young people. The 6 young people that will be allocated will be living on site together, and those who already live in the area of Darebin. So it's a great initiative considering they already know the area, and if they will be allocated one of these homes, at least they'll be familiar with the area that they've been brought up and living in already. The living on site is actually in the destination that's located in the area of Preston Central in the activity area. So they'll be able to have accessibility to obviously Preston Market and transport that would be a lot easier to get to. The temporary housing accommodation will also accommodate a live-in mentor an Anglicare support worker to support the residents of the program, which will ensure that they are kept on track and keep them going and obviously motivate them to doing in the area that they want to continue doing, whether it's schooling or possibly looking for a job. The 6 young adults will receive guidance and traineeship, including scholarships. The support is to get them into the workplace eventually, and they will also have to pay rent and learn to live with one another. It also has that they must continue to do things like chores that must be met and pay rent. Obviously, it's a normal thing that we do when we don't live at home anymore. All of the dwellings will be fully furnished, and they will be fully made and manufactured here in the area locally, and all the materials that would be made will be actually recyclable materials. So that is wonderful in itself. There is a recommendation in the report that actually is to commence the statutory process under the section of 190 and 192 and 223 of the Local Government Act of 1989, being that that's been a car park of the former Preston Bowls Club, and then we will have a
10 seconds.
further report that will come to Council regarding the outcome of the statutory process. So what that means is that there will be notification in the local paper, and those who want to object to it or are not happy about it, they will put in a request if they're not happy.
Time.
Then it will come back to Council and we'll look at those results.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
I'm not sure if I actually seconded this, but...
Oh, sorry, I thought you said, well, I'll take that as Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for providing a great overview of this project. This is a terrific model, and I think we need to recognise the wraparound service that's being included here, which is absolutely what makes it work. We know that homelessness is an absolute crisis for our society, but there are ways in which we can tackle it, particularly for young people who are, amongst all groups, one of the groups most at risk of not being able to find safe and affordable accommodation close to where they may be able to find work or education, or even stay connected to family and friends. This particular location, and I think it's important to recognise this location in terms of what it presents as outlined in the report, is close to Preston Station, it's close to Preston Market, it's close to Melbourne Polytechnic, it's close to a range of educational opportunities and employment opportunities. And it's actually not that often that the council has a piece of land where it can undergo this process, and of course invite submissions from the broader community, both in terms of objections, but also in terms of support as well, which we see from time to time with these projects. So I'm really pleased that we're considering this. It is a statutory process and a planning process that we have to go through in relation to this, which is why there's a lot of technical information in the recommendation, as councillors will see, including references to the Local Government Act. So we don't do this lightly, and we can't always do this as quickly as we'd like to, but we're getting that process underway this afternoon, and subject to the next process of the decision, we could see this operation underway in the not too distant future. It also presents an opportunity for us to share with other councils how they might undertake these sorts of projects as well in partnership with other organisations. So I commend the work of the officers in bringing this to us, but I also see this is directly
10 seconds.
the youth services strategy that we spoke about before and the previous one, which talked about practical ways to tackle youth homelessness.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. So just briefly, I wanted to commend Kids Undercover for bringing this opportunity to us to use our council land for this purpose. And I think I just want to make it really clear that one of the real benefits of this is that there's kids that might be in foster care where that's basically the funding is just cut off at 18, where a lot of kids in the room, if they're going to uni, they might be able to stay at home a little bit longer. And what this pilot project gives the opportunity to for 6 young people is that they can have this housing between 18 and 21 that really leads them into independence. And I really love that at the end of the 3 years, they're going to have a rental history. So they can go on and hopefully be in private rental or other living situations. We do have a growing homelessness population in Darebin, which we're seeing around our area and beyond, particularly in the north. And what I really love about this project is that this intervention can happen before people become homeless. And I think it's a really wonderful project, and I really hope that it's successful and that it's a pilot that can be really expanded across the state. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll just make a few comments in relation to this. Look, I really welcome this initiative and this report. I think it's a really practical way that the council can actually assist in alleviating some of the homelessness issues in our city. As we know, we've got some broad indications there are about 1,500 people who are homeless in our city. That's the broad number, but we really know that it's much higher than that. And I know of that number, there would be many young people that are homeless. So this project, because we've talked a lot about homelessness in our council, but it's been difficult for us to actually put our teeth into a practical project. And this is one of the first practical projects that we can sort of attest to. So we'll be housing 6 homeless young people, and as is mentioned by Councillor Williams, there will be mentors, there will be support staff in assisting them in order to move out of that sort of homelessness status and situation. So, and just a final thing that I would say is that Council bought this land originally to be a car park, and we're repurposing this land for the use of putting these relocatable housing units on them. So I really encourage the community to make submissions to us to enable us to relocate this, the use of this land for future use as an area where we can house the homeless.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there further speakers? There being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried.
Can that be put to the motion?
We'll also note that that's unanimous. That brings us to item 8.3, Statement of Commitment to Traditional Owners and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander People. Is there a mover for that motion? Councillor McCarthy, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Lasserve.
Thank you, Mayor. So the report we have in front of us enables us to endorse the updated Statement of Commitment to Traditional Owners and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander People. And this is with our Traditional Owners Group, which is the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation, who, as councillors will be aware, have recently undergone a name change to refer to Woiwurrung in the name. So it is wonderful to have a report recognising that. As councillors would also be aware, we have a long-standing partnership that is a very deep partnership with the traditional owners here that cover not only our area, as in this municipality, but also other municipalities. In terms of projects that council is engaged in at the moment with the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Council, there are a range of things. One of the most significant things being the renaming of council meeting rooms in Woiwurrung language, which is a way for us to very simply and practically recognise the language that people spoke in this place for thousands of years. We're also engaged through supporting local school groups to walk the Darebin Spiritual Healing Trail, guided by Aboriginal Elder Trevor Gallagher. We are undertaking a range of annual partnerships with local Aboriginal organisations, and of course working closely with 3KND radio station to secure funding to support their relocation to the police station site just near here in Rosebery Avenue. So councillors, of course, the work that we do is not just at the symbolic level through taking a strong position to recognise issues such as January 26 not being an appropriate day to recognise Australia as a nation, but also in very practical senses to work on a constant basis in that commitment to partner and to do the work both in the everyday lives of Aboriginal people who live in the city of Darebin, but also the traditional owners who, not all of whom continue to live in Darebin, but who maintain a strong connection to this place as they have. And I will just end my point to sort of thank all of the elders and community members that have been involved in this process, because their demands and their time are significant, and their generosity of partnering with us in this way is absolutely essential for us to get this right. So we value that greatly. And last, we'll just say that this land is Aboriginal land. Its sovereignty was never ceded, and we continue to make that commitment in our statements, both in the council agenda and also at all of our events, which we're really proud of.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lassurf.
Darebin Council first endorsed a statement of commitment to the Aboriginal people of this area 20 years ago. And what this motion does is really update and strengthen that commitment that we make to the Aboriginal people of this land, the traditional owners, but also all of the other Aboriginal people who call Darebin home. We're also very fortunate to be home to 17 Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. So we do have a very strong partnership, not only with the community, but the organisations supporting Aboriginal people in Darebin. Darebin has had a strong commitment and has undertaken many things over the last 20 years. In my mind, this is only just the ongoing commitment and journey that we extend in terms of our hand of friendship. You would have noticed our meeting today, the Mayor speaking the acknowledgement of country in language, in Woiwurrung language. And I think as we slowly move towards strengthening our commitment, we will see and hear and feel more of our Aboriginal culture in our everyday lives. And that's, I guess, what our commitment is as a council, is to really bring Aboriginal culture to the fore and bring it as a strength of our community. So this commitment to me is really about that. I'd also like to acknowledge Jackie Mansourian is in the audience here at the moment, and she put together an extraordinary conference last year that brought in how many school children? Hundreds of school children, 300 school children to the Aboriginal Advancement League, and it was a wonderful day, and we are planning a similar conference again in October. Are we? Yes? Yes. And Councillor McCarthy has talked about the other things that we've been doing. 3KMD play an extraordinary role in our community. They're currently housed out in Bundoora, but they will be coming here in the heart of Preston. And they provide a valuable service to not only the local community, but the broader Aboriginal community. So it's not just a commitment to Darebin, but it's a commitment to advancing the rights of Aboriginal people right across Victoria.
Thank you, Councillor Lassurf. Are there further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd like to make a couple of comments in relation to this. Look, I reckon this statement that we're putting out is a very significant document on the part of the Darebin City Council. As it's been mentioned by other councillors, this council and even the councils before this council, both the Preston Council and the Northcote Council, have had a very significant role and presence in relation to the whole Aboriginal issue. Like, for example, Aboriginal people. And one of the most important things to me in this statement here is point number 6, which says that the Aboriginal community never ceded their land. That is a very, very significant statement, and it's a statement which will have resonance into the future in relation to our First Australians, and also in relation to their cause and into the relation to their self-determination into the future. So it's a significant document, significant statement, and we're seen as being one of the councils right out there in relation to supporting Aboriginal people, not only symbolically, but also on a practical level. And also, it's worthy to remember, and former Mayor Kim Lassurf, that this council made an important stand in not recognising the celebrations around Australia Day, where we don't recognise it January 26th, and that it created a big stir in the broader community, not only here in Darebin, but on a national level. But I think for the better, and I think for the better in terms of the advancement of the Aboriginal cause.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I just wanted to acknowledge what an important part of our work, this work is, and how meaningful it is. So I wanted to give an example from a committee meeting we had recently where we do have an Aboriginal elder on the committee, and she said how welcome she feels in Darebin. And for me, that just speaks to the heart of what we're doing. And I think that this statement really, really makes it clear how important this work is to us as a council and to us as a community. And there's just one point I wanted to mention, which was number 5, which is council acknowledges the powerful call contained in the Uluru Statement from the Heart and its aspirations for justice, truth-telling, Makarrata and a voice. And I just wanted to acknowledge that while the federal government hasn't acknowledged that as well as they could, that Darebin Council really does, and that we'll continue to advocate for that statement to be recognised at other levels of government. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there further speakers? Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. And I just want to make a simple statement. I went through 3 tiers of school. Not once during that particular period of education was I learnt or taught about the Aboriginal community. Yet I've done the most growth of education, understanding about the Aboriginal community I have done the most, as I said, through this council, through the people that we meet and through the briefings that we have and through my fellow councillors. So I want to thank you for bringing me into the field and understanding about the plight of the Aboriginals, because we often hear about the migration, we often hear about refugees, but we don't hear often about the Aboriginal community. So I want to say thank you to the officers that put together this report, and for my fellow councillors and the officers that I get to meet at briefings to bring me into that territory that I was not given whilst I was going through 3 layers of education. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously.
We note it as unanimous.
We'll note that also as unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Greco. So that brings us to 8.4, food waste recycling implementation, moved by Councillor Messina and seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation of option 1 to the rollout of the city-wide food waste recycling service and to be implemented in spring 2019. What we have here is a report that shows the planning, the preparation, the launch and the maintaining and also the evaluation. How successful was this strategy? The waste platform in Australia is changing. Our methods here in Australia are antiquated compared to when you compare them to the rest of the world. I guess if we had a magic wand, we'd introduce the Games of Thrones dragon and burn all the waste down. But of course, that's not environmentally friendly. Or we could call on the three-eyed raven to get rid of waste. But what is important about waste, and I think what the average Australian doesn't understand, and especially in Melbourne, is that 38% of our waste is food. And what that means is enormous repercussions for our landfill sites. We have 4 landfill sites in Victoria. 1 is about to close. And what that means statistically, and if I'm happy to share this, is that in Melbourne our population is growing. By 2041, our waste volumes are projected to grow by 63%. That's 16.5 million tonnes of waste. That's an extra 1 million that we need to manage through landfill sites. With 1 closing, we have no service to where we're going to put that landfill site, the garbage itself. Now, traditionally, waste was an item that was collected by council from the bin and then from the bin to the contractor. So what we need to do now is initiate a social lens and an environmental consumer behavioural change when it comes to waste. So we need to look at, first of all, food avoidance. We need to look at the rubbish that is collected and what happens thereafter. So what we have done and what we're hoping that we're going to support is that the waste will be collected, it will be taken to a site, it will be collected and a rollout throughout the municipality where everybody has a green waste bin where your food can be processed. Now, we're also looking at, I understand, fish and meat, which is an important component of waste, food waste, where it will be collected, then taken over and then reduced into compost. And that compost will be given to our farmers. So I'm happy to endorse this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillor Williams.
Residents will be able to use and put food waste in their green waste bin alongside your garden waste. The success of the program relies on the residents having the right information and support to change the behaviour and accurately understanding the waste recycling requirements. Any resident that doesn't have a green waste bin, they can actually obtain one through council, and those who actually have a pensioner or a carer's card, they will also get and apply for a discount for those green waste bins. Now, anyone that has a compost or worming farm in their backyard, they would know the enormous benefits of composting and how it also improves the soil quality from the worm castings and fertilisation of your plants and reduce waste going to landfill. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and obviously water savings for your garden. So if you don't have your own backyard waste service that you can actually put into your little worm farm or your compost bin, this is another alternative that council is going to be providing, which will actually eliminate having the 38% that is actually going to landfill at this point in time. It's also very significant environmental changes that we all know that we're in that movement of people that we like to try and recycle as much as possible. So here in council that we are doing that obviously at the local level.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow on from Councillor Williams in relation to what this will actually mean in terms of our greenhouse gas emission reduction target and the actual direct benefit that introducing this scheme, hopefully across our whole city in terms of all green waste bins, would mean. So, as councillors would see in the report, there is a 77% support rating from residents as per our survey last year for us to do this, which means that basically 3 out of 4 people are saying that they would like to do this, that they see that it makes sense. I would say that some of those people as well probably do compost at home. However, we know that a lot of people in our community cannot compost because they live in apartments or don't have the facilities on site, and that's a real challenge. So what this will do is effectively reduce emissions by up to 1,600 tonnes in the first year under the high-end scenario, so best case scenario, with a minimum emissions reduction of 460 tonnes at the low-end scenario. This is a significant reduction, and it is of an important impact because when it comes to food waste is not something that you can easily transfer into energy. It has to go somewhere, and in this case, we are entering a circular economy where, as mentioned before, this would then be provided as compost to farmers. So it would find another use in another way, rather than sitting in landfill and adding to toxic fumes and leachate. So all round, it makes environmental sense, economic sense, and of course social sense as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there further speakers? There being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is passed unanimously. I'm glad the gallery is in favour as well. So those apples that spend a week in the bottom of your school bag before you discover them, or the lettuce that goes slimy in the bottom of your fridge, you now can put it in your green bin. We'll move to 8.5, the 2018-19 Quarter 3 Progress Report. Moved by Councillor Newton, seconded by Councillor Messina. Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. So when the 9 of us started our council term 2.5 years ago, we gave council a very ambitious agenda, and we had 16 big actions that we wanted to achieve over our 4 years on council. And we're on track for 10 of those 16 big items. That includes doubling solar power in Darebin. We've got an item about that later as well. Creating Climate Emergency Darebin. We had a really wonderful Climate Emergency Ambassador dinner last week, and we really, really want to see the whole community involved in addressing the climate emergency. We've been improving walking and cycling, in particular through the Streets of People program and also the Octopus School program. We had a really big win recently where it's now going to be funded that the extra level crossings will be removed in Preston, which is something that Darebin Council advocated really strongly for, and we're so pleased to see that going ahead. We've also established a nature trust to create more open space on Darebin, and we're also working on our open space strategy at the moment. In terms of what else is on track, we've got reinvigorating the Darebin Arts Centre, which recently I went and saw. We've got beautiful new gold panelling there. Everything's looking absolutely wonderful and very refreshed. Increasing our tree canopy in urban forests, which was referred to in the question time. Expanding our land subdivision levy, which is looking at open space, and as we get more development in Darebin, how do we have a commensurate increase in open space? We're also looking at a new suburb for Northland that's going to be one of the most sustainable suburbs in the city, using the opportunity created by the government's removal of road and rail crossings. So our staff have been advocating really strongly for the best outcomes for our community on that, and developing a plan for the revitalisation of Central Preston. And I really wanted to acknowledge that the items that aren't on track, there's really good reasons for them. So for example, with Ruthven, Our initial idea was to have a children's hub, but the community has told us that they really want open space on that park. So we're going back, doing more consultation and looking at how best to do that. Multi-sport stadium and the renewal of the Northgate pool are all things that we're looking for going ahead. Reimagining and revitalising senior citizens clubs and creating the developer contribution schemes are also on the way. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Rennie. Thank you, Councillor Newton. When we were, as Councillor Newton has actually stated, when we came together as a council, we formalised a council plan. Based on that plan, and they're pretty big goals, we need to come up with an implementation plan. And what this does is give us a progress, and not only a progress just for this council, but also for the community. What did we say we were going to do in 2016, and how are we tracking along those lines? Now, you'd have to be wearing blinders if you didn't walk through the municipality or drive through municipality to see what changes we have made. Not only socially but environmentally and also economically in terms of bringing new businesses into the area through. We have a strong economic division. We have a strong arts and cultural centre, and can I tell you the money that we've implemented in this particular plan for the Preston Precinct vibrates for me on this particular council plan. And the elevated rail, which of course we did a lot of advocating for the Oakover, Murray, Kramer and Bell removal crossing, and also for Reservoir. And what that means to the Preston Precinct in terms of the Darebin Arts and Entertainment Centre. And I think there is an announcement today for what's going to happen in High Street. So it's going to bring another pulse and ignition into the area. So I look forward to the other projects that we've discussed in here and who it was eloquently went through by Councillor Newton. So at the end of our term, we're going to have tick, tick, ticks, and you can walk through, drive through, cycle through and see the changes that we've made. Productive, not only reactive but productive changes for this municipality to ensure that it keeps alive and it's vibrant and dynamic. So I look forward to next year.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight one thing in the recommendation, apart from the good progress on these various projects, which is a proposed change that we're going to be making, which is, and this is by virtue of a project in Elphington at the Melbourne Farmers Market site there, which councillors would be aware, is actually been an initiative in this council term to dedicate a whole section of the Melbourne Innovation Centre to the Melbourne Farmers Markets. A highly successful enterprise. Every Sunday, of course, people gather, often 1,000 or more people gathering at that site. One of the challenges at the site, of course, is actually to provide the right kind of power to power that site. And so there is a proposal here to divert funding that was proposed for a shade structure, which came in at 3 times the cost, to instead provide 3-phase power. I visited the site last week, and I can report to councillors that it's not just the farmers markets activity that's taking place there, but some extraordinary outreach activity, including a project in partnership with Reservoir High School, where students at Reservoir will be engaged in food production and also food distribution to each other. So a fresh food hub delivered and supported between Elphington and Reservoir. And this is the first time that any of our schools have engaged in that sort of a project in this way. So it is so exciting to see that happening. And the thing that we promised with this site was that it would not just benefit people in that immediate Elphington area, but also throughout the whole city of Darebin. So that's starting to come to light. The last thing I'll just highlight is some of the achievements listed there, and of course some of those achievements directly came out of the youth strategy, the previous incarnation of that. So that's great to see a connection to council's work. So a great quarter, but a lot of work to do to achieve our big 16 actions.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there further speakers? Being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings us to 8.6, Solar Saver Special Charge Scheme. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Lasserf and seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lasserf.
Okay. I think now more than ever we need climate leadership. after the, in my opinion, devastating result on the weekend, we need to make sure that as a local government we could do all that we can to address the climate emergency. And as Mayor Rennie said in response to a question earlier, we were the first council anywhere in the world to recognise the climate emergency, and we are acting accordingly. Solar Save, this item today is in regards to our Solar Saver program. It is our flagship program which helps our community transition to renewable energy by providing them with support to install solar panels on their roofs by assisting them with the upfront costs. I'm very happy to see that nearly every council meeting this year we've had a new batch of the Solar Saver program come through, and today we are declaring a special charge on 146 properties to add approximately 775 kilowatts of solar. The council plan, which Councillor Newton referred to earlier, around doubling solar power, outlines one of our big actions as doubling solar power in Darebin, and we are well on the way to make sure that we deliver on that commitment, particularly through the Solar Saver program. I just wanted to pull out a couple of the figures from that report. By the end of this financial year, we will have helped residents in Darebin install 2.8 megawatts of solar on their roof, which is equivalent to saving 7,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions every year. So that is an amazing effort. More specifically about the Solar Saver program, it is helping residents by providing assistance with the upfront cost of the solar installation, and then them paying back that cost to council through a special rate charge over 10 years. So what this does is it allows households in Darebin, particularly low-income households and pensioner households who may not have the money to put solar panels on their roofs, give them a financial mechanism to do so. We also make sure that we are reaching out to groups in our community that might not be as literate around these sorts of matters. So we do a lot of work in terms of engaging our culturally and linguistically diverse communities, but it is open to all residents within Darebin. I guess in closing, I've been in a bit of a state of despair around climate change over the last couple of days, and I guess there's a call to action that we have this program, which is a world-leading program. We need to make sure that we continue to get people to participate in the program, and we also need to make sure that other levels of government hear our call in terms of the transition to renewable energy. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lassurf. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just over the weekend, I ran into 3 people who all had either recently or are about to have their Solar Saver installations put up. And what's lovely about this is that a program which we started here in the City of Darebin to help pensioners who were facing huge electricity costs and were not wanting to turn on their air conditioners which isn't English, and of course the broader community as well. And what's lovely is that people are starting to develop this sense that they're a Solar Saver household and they're aware of all the other Solar Saver households in their street or in their neighbourhood. This is the kind of community building that is absolutely essential to tackling the climate crisis and the climate emergency. In a few weeks' time, Darebin is going to be hosting the first coming together of cities around the world, around Australia and then around the world, online through basically an internet, a web platform, a webinar platform, bringing those cities together and actually talking about not only the climate emergency and the work we need to do at national and international levels, but also the really practical things that we're doing, like Solar Saver, that actually make a difference to people's lives, that actually reduce their energy bills, that switch them to renewables, and in fact end up with more dollars in their pocket at the end of each month or each year. So this is really exciting. I would also note that we're now 62% of the way to achieving our target of doubling the amount of renewable energy here in the City of Darebin, achieving 29.2 megawatts of solar in Darebin. So that is an extraordinary achievement, and congratulations to the new 146 properties that are part of this program.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there further speakers? Councillor Williams.
Thank Thank you. What I love about this program, possibly most of all, is that the Solar Saver program really takes the headache out of trying to work out all the watts and what is needed for your property, because there's nothing worse than you go from one company to another and they have different types of voltage and watts and you're trying to work all that out. The other thing is also working out who are the best tradespeople who could take on the job that would be right for you. So Council does all that headache, and we actually have been very proud and been very proactive in doing a great role in this area, as I too have had some wonderful feedback from residents who are taking advantage of this, and it actually, as I said, takes the headache out and gives it a nice smooth transition for more and more residents to come on board and to realise the benefits that they will gain from having solar panel, especially during the winter days when we have very cold nights that people are scared to obviously turn their heater on, or those extremely hot days where particularly elderly who are concerned about the cost of putting the air conditioner on, and this sort of saves that headache also.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Further speakers? There being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. 8.7, intention to declare a special rate levy. We'll just pause for a minute. Thank you once again to students from William Rutherford Secondary College for coming along. So, councillors, 8.7, intention to declare a special rate charge. Moved by Councillor Messina, seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mayor Reding, I'm happy to endorse the officer's recommendation. When it comes to economic viability of a precinct, you need to have structure, and that particular structure needs to involve a group of traders that will come together and ignite to bring people into the area, because that's going to increase their cash flow basically. And small business is the largest provider of employment in a particular area. People like to work and play and socialise in the area that they live. So as a co-chair with my councillors, Councillor Williams of this Preston Central Business Advisory Group, we witnessed many promotions into the area. We witnessed events with the Preston Market, with the High Street, and also with the Northern Blues Football Club, where we put together promotions like the Chinese New Year, like some working with the Italians when the Preston Market had its particular public day. And what this does is provide a levy, a rate that a trader needs to pay for the marketing of the area. It is not an expense that goes to council. It actually is a return on investment to their particular business. And what it does is drive economics, the economy in the particular area. It brings people through. What they've also engaged now into is a social media platform through Facebook. Not only do they have a Facebook page, but they also have now a very successful Instagram page. So it's to drive economics into the particular area and also keep people in jobs in our particular area. So I'm happy to endorse this.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. The special rate actually expires for the 30th of June 2019, so this is why this has come to council, that we need to obviously continue on collecting that special rate. And what that special rate does is actually, yes, it is a little bit more than your normal rates that you pay, but that benefit actually is tenfold. In reference to that amount, it goes back into special events. I mean, look at the Lunar New Year celebrations that we have and all the other promotions and events that we have regarding Easter and Christmas. The Preston Central has been a place for over 20 years where we've had the special rate, and I think it's important that we do continue that, because it's not only it brings more people to the area, but it also it brings the local businesses together. It brings more families together, and obviously shows that Preston is an area that we engage in our local residents, and that we nurture them, and we actually appreciate them coming and shopping with their locals. So this is to continue on. It'll raise $110,000 for the first year, and the scheme will continue to obviously specified, and it'll keep continuing those marketing events and promotions and advertising those marketing materials in reference to social media and to the central management.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. 8.8, Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety. Moved by Councillor Greco, seconded by Councillor Messina. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm really happy to move this item. As councillors would know, there's a Royal Commission currently in place, and the Royal Commission has been hearing lots of evidence and lots of community concern in relation to the state of our aged care system, both home care and also residential care. And there's been some horrific stories so far that have come out of that commission. Look, I really endorse this submission by council, and I thank the officers for compiling this together. I must say, personally, I don't think it goes far enough, because I think that some of the underlying issues behind the problems associated with aged care has been the tendency over the last decade of the privatisation and deregulation associated with the whole aged care sector, and that's what the Royal Commission has been put into place, and that's what we're trying to catch up with. It's a bit like the banking system, where we saw heaps of deregulation and then it all came to a heap, and we had a Royal Commission. But notwithstanding that, I think we make some very salient points in our submission, and I'd just like to touch on a couple of them. First of all, we're saying in our submission that we don't want that we want block funding to continue beyond 2022, and I think that's an important consideration, particularly for council. Also, we want that the more resources to be allocated so that people understand the aged care system, because people are getting lost in navigating the aged care system. Not only are older people getting lost in navigating the system, but their carers are also getting lost in navigating the system. Also, I think one important point that we make in our submission is in relation to the no disadvantage test. We say here that it could be used. I think it should be used, but I'm not going to put forward an amendment given that this is a submission. But I think that's a key factor in relation to our submission, that no elderly resident receiving aged care services should be disadvantaged from moving from the current system that's with council, or if they decide to move, or it's their will to move to an aged care package, there should be no disadvantage to the end user, and that there should be no extra expense, or that the quality of the service should not diminish as a result of that. And what this report points out is that many people are not making that jump because they receive a better service from council. And the last issue that we've been putting forward in relation to this submission is that given that local government is a big contributor, and this council is particularly a big contributor with nearly $14 million into the sector, is that the council should be able to continue, if it wants to, continue to provide services to the community in relation to aged care services. So I commend the report.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Messina.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I want to commend our stance in terms of providing this information to submit to the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality Safety. I'm not going to talk about home care packages versus council packages. That's not my role. What I'm going to talk about is the ageing population, and it is evident. We have an ageing population, not only in Darebin, but Australia-wide, so we need to ensure that they have the better quality of services. They've paid their taxes. They've went through and supported this nation through their employment, through their social activities. They should have a right to services once they reach 65 and above. So I'm going to say that I'm not here again to say this is not whether council should remain maintaining services. This is about our submission to the World Aged Care Commission. So I'm not going to talk about any of the packages or what have you, but I want to emphasise that it is important that we do look after our age, and the quality of service is extremely important. My aged care and the evolution of the reform of the Aged Care Act has changed enormously in the last 15 years, and it's been amazement. It's been a spider's webbed into this area, that area. What's a program? What's dementia? What's a dementia supplement? What's an oxygen supplement? These are all these layers of complexities that make it very difficult for the average person to navigate. So if it's hard for us to navigate, well then it's going to be, as a professional, it's going to be just as difficult for the average consumer. But the care that they get from the service provider needs to be investigated. We've seen and heard all those horror stories. They've been in the media and in the press. So not only have we heard about the horror stories, but we also hear about the good stories. So this isn't just to highlight negativity, because we also need to know about the positivity of our aged care system. Because if you have a look at what happens elsewhere in the world, they don't get the service that we have here.
That's time.
We do need to do some investigations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there further speakers? Being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. 8.9, proposed sale of discontinued roads. Before you move that, Councillor Newton, Ms Wilkinson has an amended motion, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, there's an amended, officers would like to put forward an amended officer recommendation, please. It specifically relates to, in the printed document, point 1B, which is the rear, so the Massey Avenue property. There's been an issue there with the consultation process, and so rather than recommend that we go through the 189 process, we're recommending that we continue the consultation. So the change is to remove 1C and add 3.
That's acceptable to me. Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Newton and seconded by Councillor Greco. Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. So this is a statutory process that we go through quite often on council meetings, where we basically put forward to complete the statutory process to sell land that was used as roads that we don't use anymore. So in a couple of these cases, they haven't been used as roads since 1997, and this is really just getting through the process. So roads that have often been used for people's backyards is just sorted out, so they're not on title as council roads anymore, and they're sold to the people that are currently using them. So we've got 3 tonight in Leamington Street, Massey Avenue and Lawley Street, and also Hughes Parade.
Just to clarify, we've now got 2 with further consultation.
Oh, sorry, we've got 2 here today. Which are Leamington Street Reservoir and then also 72 Hughes Parade Reservoir. And I will take the report as read by all councillors. So with the amendment, I think this is fine to go ahead with the 2. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Greco.
Nothing further to add.
Okay. Any further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings us to 8.10, Audit Committee Charter. Moved by Councillor Lassurf and seconded by Councillor Messina. Councillor Lassurf.
So the Audit Committee is an advisory committee that councillors needs to establish under the Local Government Act, and the Audit Committee is responsible for looking at matters related to financial reporting, risk management, corporate governance and internal control systems. And our Audit Committee has a membership of 3 external members and 2 councillors. The Audit Committee and the administration reviewed the Audit Committee Charter earlier this year and have recommended some changes to the Audit Committee Charter, and these changes are really to make sure that the way that the Audit Committee is operating is reflected in the Charter. It's also to make sure that we are consistent with some of the Local Government Act wording, and ensuring that there is timely distribution of the papers to the Audit Committee, which is really important to make sure that they are read before the meeting, because they are very long agendas. So I support the revised Audit Committee Charter as put forward by the officers, and in closing say that the Audit Committee does provide a really important role in terms of making sure that Council is fulfilling its financial responsibility and also management of risks and internal controls. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lassurf. Councillor Messina.
Thank you, Councillor Lassurf. I guess this is an audit committee charter. I'm part of the committee now. I attended my first meeting on the 25th of March, and I found it quite entertaining in terms of the statistical data. And what this actually does is a report for the process that audits an audit committee. This is what basically it is. So I'm happy to endorse it, and we actually have an audit committee this afternoon that we won't be attending, but I'm actually going to miss that. But I look forward to other processes and practices that the audit committee put through and submit in their reporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Further speakers?
I just have
Councillor
a question,
Greco.
if I may.
Yes.
I'm just looking at the charter just very quickly, and I've noticed that on page 241, and councillors could make reference to that, where it talks about the fees, and I just need an explanation just to see whether there's an inconsistency or not. At item 3, or under the fees, which is on page 241, it says that committee members, if they're absent from the meeting, they will not be paid, subject to getting leave from the committee. But when it talks about the chairperson's fee, that they will be paid irrespective of attendance at the meeting. And I'm just wondering what the logic behind those two are, and I just want to foreshadow an amendment where we make those two things consistent, subject to the committee, that the chairperson, if in the case that they are absent, that they should receive the fee.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Greco. I'll refer that to Ms Bishop. Melinda.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, that's really about the fact that the chairperson of the committee provides a range of support to the committee beyond just attendance at the meetings, and so that's why I guess that discrepancy appears in the fee section of the charter.
Thank you for that response. Are there any further speakers?
I'd just like to move an amendment just to reinforce that point, because it doesn't take away. Well, the amendment reads that the chairperson fee under C will be replaced to say that will be paid to the chairperson in the event that they are absent from the meeting with leave from the committee.
Can I just ask a question before I accept or reject that proposed amendment? The chairperson fee is a fee on top of the member fee, is that correct? So if they don't turn up, they don't receive the member fee, but they'll continue to receive the chairperson. So they're two separate fees?
That's a good point.
Okay, good point.
If I could ask for further clarification, thank you.
It's through you, Mayor Rennie. It's true to say that the chairperson fee is in addition to the member fee, but it is paid as the one fee. So
I guess my question is, if the chairperson doesn't attend the meeting, do they receive the member fee?
They would receive the full fee, which includes the member fee, that's right.
But that would be inconsistent with what's in the charter.
Yes.
I guess that's not my reading of it, so I'm not... Hang on.
Okay.
So just to clarify that, if I may, so just if I understand it, so the chairperson receives both the sitting fee plus the additional fee for being the chairperson. If they don't attend at the moment, they will continue to receive both components of that fee. Yes?
Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Rennie, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So,
Can we hear the words from Councillor Greco again?
Look, I just picked this up.
We'll make sure that we get them in writing before we proceed.
But I will seek some advice in terms of, from officers to express my intent so that we get the right wording in the charter. But essentially, it would be that the chairperson does not receive the fee in the case that they are absent. But again, consistent with the member's fee, without the leave from with the leave from the, or without the leave from the committee. Okay. So it's the committee that essentially says, look, we understand why you were on leave.
So I'll seek advice from the governance team about the appropriate wording for that amendment. I think we're clear about the intent of the amendment. So councillors Lassurf and Messina, once we've got the words up, I'll ask if this amendment is satisfactory for you.
No, but it's a bit consistent with...
Councillor Greco, if you...
Well, yeah, we'll check. Firstly, I'll make sure, Councillor Greco, that the words that come up meet your expectations of the amendment. If they do, I'll then ask Councillor Lassurf and Councillor Messina if that amendment is acceptable to them as the mover and seconder.
Would you like us to add the bit about without leave from the committee? Yep.
Yes.
Do we need to wait until they have...
Member fee will be paid, not be paid if they're absent. Be paid. So it's this.
So Councillor Greco, does that meet your expectations of the amendment?
So it's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that acceptable to the mover?
I'm happy to accept it, but can we just put chairperson so it's consistent with the charter? Thank you.
Okay, we'll change chair to chairperson. And Councillor Messina?
I'm happy with that.
Happy with that. Okay. Thank you for that amendment, Councillor Greco. That now becomes the motion that we're debating. So we've heard from Councillor Lassurf and we've heard from Councillor Messina. Are there any people who, any councillors who still wish to debate? No. There being none, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. And that brings us to the end of consideration of reports. We're now on to consideration of responses to petitions, notices of motion and general business. There are none. Notices of motion, there are none. Reports of standing committees, 11.1. That's moved by Councillor Lassurf and seconded by Councillor Newton. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Item 12, records of assemblies of councillors, moved by Councillor Messina and seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? That motion is carried. And 13, reports by Mayor and councillors, moved by Councillor Lassurf and seconded by Councillor Williams. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings us to item 14, consideration of reports considered confidential. There is a report considered confidential, so...
We have a report to close the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Lassurf, for the motion to close the meeting, seconded by Councillor Messina. All those in favour? Thank you, members of the gallery. The next report is a confidential item. Thank you for your attendance today, and I'll ask you to leave now so we can consider the confidential item.